on his face. I guess
My handsome young son.
Tyler Horka, who's a name that you guys might remember, covered Mississippi State for a while here in Mississippi, but he's moved on and covers Notre Dame now for blueandgold.com, which is the On3 site covering Notre Dame. And hey, Dad, we'll get the pleasantries out of the way. You say what you got to say to this guy.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, Dad. What's going on?
It's both a greeting and a true statement.
Absolutely.
So what's it like right now for you and your publication covering a team that basically the entire college football world is waiting on to make a decision that I guess in theory they may never make? What has this been like for you the last few days?
Yeah, I guess it's been a week now, but it feels like it's been 2 days, or maybe it feels like it's been a month at the same time. I don't know. It definitely doesn't feel like it's been a week. We'll put it that way. Anything that we write right now that has the words Notre Dame and Big Ten or conference realignment, any of those key words in a headline, it gets clicks on clicks on clicks because, like you said, everybody in college football wants to know what Notre Dame is doing. And you guys have me on your show in Mississippi. There's probably other SEC schools that are wondering, where's Notre Dame going to go? There's probably some brass inside the SEC that are thinking, maybe we can get Notre Dame because, who knows? Anything can happen with this conference realignment stuff. And USC, UCLA, that was huge. Obviously, we're still talking about it today. But I think pretty quickly, and I wrote about it last week, the narrative shifted to Notre Dame pretty quickly because once we got over oh my gosh, how are two schools from LA going to be in the Big Ten when they've got to travel all the way across the country to play a soccer match or volleyball and obviously football? We got over that pretty quickly and everything went to, okay, Notre Dame is right there. They don't have to go very far to play any of those teams. I could get in the car right now and be in Ann Arbor in 3 hours, I think it is. So it's always made sense. It has never made more sense than right now, and we haven't even talked about the money aspect of it yet. So it is kind of crazy because Notre Dame's been independent for all of our lifetimes and our father's lifetimes, our grandfather's lifetimes. Notre Dame has always been independent. So to have this kind of cloud looming over where they could join the Big Ten tomorrow and nobody would be shocked, it's a pretty surreal moment to be covering Notre Dame right now.
Well, let's talk about the crazy idea, though. You say you can get in your car and be in Ann Arbor in 3 hours. What if I said you got to get on a plane and go to Gainesville or Athens to cover a football game? Make a case for Notre Dame joining the SEC.
Well, I think as awesome as it was for USC and UCLA to join the Big Ten, we have to remember that we're a year removed from Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. And if we're talking about brands in college football, USC has slipped a little bit. I think you can make a case that even with Texas being what Texas is, and you guys know that I'm a graduate of that university, so I'll be the first to tell you that they've been really bad for 12 years. I think that was still bigger news. So if you're talking about, if this is all about money, and this is all about big brands going to the most powerful conferences in college football, Notre Dame has a huge endowment. Notre Dame has a huge following across the country. Notre Dame can do whatever Notre Dame wants. And on the flip side, the SEC is the most powerful conference in college football. This has been really awesome for the Big Ten. Put a lot of eyeballs on the Big Ten. But like I said, we're still a year removed from the SEC making an even bigger move. So if Notre Dame kind of wants to follow that trend and do what Texas and Oklahoma did last year, I would not be shocked if they do it because they already play a national schedule. They play two games against California teams every year, USC, Stanford. They're playing in Baltimore this year against Navy. They're playing in Las Vegas this year against BYU. If anybody knows how to travel, it's Notre Dame. I don't think going down to Gainesville would be an issue for the Notre Dame athletic department. And if it meant you have arguably the biggest brand in college football in the biggest conference in college football, that seems to be what's making the most sense these days.
What are your subscribers and readers think about that idea? I mean, it feels like the Big Ten's a more natural fit, obviously. But have you gauged their interest in, hey, if that were to happen, we think this?
Yeah, they're definitely more scared of the SEC option, just in terms of, oh my gosh, we've got to play Alabama and Georgia and Florida, and the Mississippi schools have two of the most high-profile coaches in all of college football right now, and they could both be on the up and up. It's a scary proposition. I don't think the fans care as much about the notoriety and the brand of the SEC. As much as I just said, the distance isn't an issue for the athletic department itself. I'm standing here looking out my window in South Bend, Indiana right now, and I'm a long way from Mississippi. So I don't think the SEC means as much to the fans. So if it meant going down there and, these 11-1 seasons that Notre Dame is accustomed to having in a relatively easy schedule, if that slipped to 9-3 and maybe even 8-4, they definitely wouldn't be in favor of that. And I know the Big Ten would be no cakewalk either, but I think you could make a case that they'd get by easier in the Big Ten. So from a fan's perspective, I think geographically it makes sense to go to the Big Ten. And just in terms of what a 12-game schedule would look like, they'd probably be in favor of going to the Big Ten as well.
Let's talk about an actual football question for a change of pace. Marcus Freeman, first year, huge game to start off the season with Ohio State. What are your just initial thoughts, and now that you've gotten to know him a little bit? He feels like he's set up for success. He says the right things. I think he's going to be really good up there. What do you think?
It almost feels like it might be too good to be true. And you mentioned that Ohio State game in week 1. That'd be like popping a balloon if they went over there, and one of the best offenses in the country, Heisman Trophy front runner. If you look at all the odds right now, and C.J. Stroud, scored 60 points on him or something, it'd be deflating for sure. But what's crazy is people forget that Marcus Freeman, they don't forget up here, but you may forget nationally that Marcus Freeman coached to the Fiesta Bowl, and technically he's 0-1 as a head coach. Everybody forgets that because all anyone cares about right now is look at the recruiting rankings. I'm pretty sure 24/7, I know on 3, Notre Dame is number 1. To win an offseason, you've got to be a really good recruiter. He's done that. If you want to be a good program moving forward, you have to have the elite players. I think Notre Dame is going to have a 2023 class that they've never had during the Brian Kelly era. I think the highest that they finished was 4th in 2013, and of course that was 1 year removed from playing against Alabama in the national title game. So yeah, he says the right things. He's obviously doing the right things in the off season, but Ohio State is a different beast, and that'd be a taste of what the Big Ten might be like if they go up there and like I said, they lose. But they kind of have nothing to lose in that game. I don't know if you guys have seen the betting lines. They're 2 touchdown underdogs. So you go over to Columbus and just kind of let it rip. And I've said a couple times if they lose big, it'd be deflating. But what if they keep it close? And what if they win? They're set up really nicely to maybe make another run at the college football playoff. And if Marcus Freeman does that in year 1 with the recruiting classes that he's obviously about to bring in, then absolutely he could be a wildly successful coach at Notre Dame.
You know a thing or two about covering a week 1 upset too, right?
Yeah, I think I've seen one down in Baton Rouge, maybe.
Yeah, it might have been that way. So maybe a couple of minutes left here, Tyler. Bottom line with all of this, with Notre Dame, do you have a feel for a timeline? Are they really just going to sit here, wait it out, wait for the best deal, or do you think that there could be something happening in the works by the end of this football season? I guess
that's a good question. I would say that if it doesn't happen by like October or November, then it's not going to happen for, I think, 2 years has been thrown out there. And the reason that Notre Dame has the luxury of waiting is it all revolves around these TV contracts, right? I think Notre Dame's in a position where, the number has been floated out. Maybe it's going to be $80 million for the Big Ten. See what that number actually is, because the Big Ten has to negotiate this rights deal coming up. It ends after this season. Notre Dame's deal with NBC ends after the 2025 season. So maybe Notre Dame's even in a position where NBC, obviously, who's been with Notre Dame since 1991, knows what's going on. Maybe they, up the pocket check number and they whip out something pretty substantial to get Notre Dame to say, hey, maybe we can still be independent. But even if that happens, they're going to be losing money if they don't go to one of these conferences. That's something that Jack Swarbrick has to think about. It's something that he's talking to a lot of different people about. So I don't think it's ever really been about money for Notre Dame, as it has much been about just the unique nature of this program and what it stands for and the way it's operated on independence for almost 150 years. But, man, these things change on an exponential rate, and we've seen how crazy the last 2 summers have been. If anything, nobody would be shocked if Notre Dame threw away 150 years of independence to say, hey, the check is worth it. We're going to get to play all these really good teams. This is what everyone in college football is doing now. We might as